A bike left behind, a story unraveling, and a woman the world refused to forget. For 3 years, the disappearance of Suzanne Morphew raised more questions than answers. And for a while, it looked like there might never be justice. But then, something shifted.
The grand jury has indicted Barry Morphew on the single count of murder in the first degree.
Yet another stunning twist in the case of Suzanne Morphew, a Colorado mom of 2 who went missing on Mother's Day in 2020. Her husband, Barry Morphew, now charged a second time for her murder.
It has been a long road, but I can tell you that our law enforcement officers have never forgotten, have never given up, and they have been working so hard to get to the place where we are today.
If you've been with us since the beginning of this case, you know this isn't just a story about a missing person. It's a story about hidden truths, a marriage unraveling, and a mother quietly documenting her pain while secretly trying to find a way to be with someone else. What sets this case apart from the others we've covered, though, is what came next. A body, an autopsy, and a second chance at justice. I'm Sarah Reed, and this is Sequestered, Season 2, Case 4, The Disappearance and Murder of Suzanne Morphew, Part 3. It's hard to describe the kind of strength it takes to live one way in public and another entirely in private. But Suzanne Morphew had been doing just that for years. Behind the pictures, the bike rides, the family photos in Salida, she was keeping secrets. Not because she wanted to, but because she was afraid not to. In January 2020, Suzanne began documenting things. She created a file in her notes app. By May, it had grown to 60 lines long. 60 lines of pain, of pleading, of tracking the control she felt from Barry and his anger, his accusations, his threats. On May 6, 2020, Suzanne sent Barry a message.
I'm done. I could care less what you're up to, and have been for years. We just need to figure this out civilly.
But they didn't find this message on her phone. Investigators found it as a screenshot on Barry's. He'd deleted the text, but not before accidentally saving an image of the very thing he was trying to erase. Just days earlier, on May 4th, Barry had sent disturbing messages of his own.
When I'm dead, going to see my Savior. This life on earth is a mere grain of sand compared to eternity.
Those texts were deleted too. And that wasn't all. Suzanne had been confiding in friends through texts. She told them,
He's also been abusive emotionally and physically. It's hard dealing with the harsh abrasiveness and having to show respect. I feel no peace when he's here. I would not feel safe alone with him.
She even told one friend,
He won't speak of divorce.
And that's why she was planning to leave. But that's not all Suzanne was doing in secret. She also had a spy pen tucked into the drawer of her dresser, hidden between her bras so that Barry would never find it. The pen wasn't just something Suzanne stumbled upon. It was given to her by her closest friend, Sheila Oliver. Sheila had grown increasingly worried, concerned about Barry's outbursts, his control, and the fear that lived just behind Suzanne's soft voice. So, she did what any best friend might do in that situation. She bought a spy pen and convinced Suzanne to use it. It was a way to record what couldn't be said out loud, a way to document the truth no one else could see. That pen became her only witness, and what it captured would tell a story no one expected. It had one purpose: to record the truth. Inside the recordings were arguments, raised voices, Barry's volatility. It's the kind of fear you don't just talk about. It's the kind of fear you record. But the spy pen didn't just capture Barry. It captured someone else. Someone who gave Suzanne hope. A voice that brought softness into her life. Jeff Libler. Suzanne had reconnected with Jeff back in 2018 on LinkedIn. They were high school friends from Alexandria, Indiana. And by 2019, their friendship had become something more. They shared texts, emails, travel plans, and love. On May 9th, 2020, the day before Suzanne disappeared, Jeff received 59 LinkedIn messages from her. At 11:42 a.m., she wrote,
Guess who's alone again?
At 2:03 p.m., she sent him a selfie. And at 2:11, she messaged,
I'm on WA.
which is believed to mean WhatsApp. This was her last known communication. Jeff texted again at 2:39 p.m., 2:46 p.m., and 2:47 p.m. But Suzanne never replied. At that exact time, 2:47 p.m., Barry Morphew's phone went into airplane mode. The timing wasn't just suspicious, it was chilling. Investigators would later learn that Barry had deleted dozens of texts and dozens of calls. Not a single voicemail from Suzanne remained on his phone. And when they asked why, he told them,
I didn't want the girls to see them.
But investigators knew what he was really trying to hide. Not just what happened to Suzanne, but who she really was and what she really wanted. Because Suzanne wasn't a woman who vanished. She was a woman who decided to stop pretending. And someone made sure she didn't get that chance to start over. Suzanne left behind a trail of truth, but Barry, he tried to rewrite the ending, and the story he told didn't match the facts. When Barry switched his phone into airplane mode at 2:47 p.m. on May 9th, 2020, it was like dropping a pin on a map. The timeline had officially begun, and whether he realized it or not, Barry had just marked the moment when everything would start to unravel. What happened next would take investigators months to piece together. But thanks to his truck's telematics, basically an onboard computer tracking movement and data, they did. From that moment, at 2:47 p.m. on May 9th until 5:37 a.m. the next morning, Barry Morphew's movements told a story, and it wasn't the one he told police. Instead of grieving or searching, Barry was busy. He spent the evening disposing of evidence, covering his tracks, and, according to investigators, staging a crime scene. But when the questions started coming, Barry didn't say any of that. He said he'd been chasing a chipmunk with a gun. He said he was outside the house, circling the property, gun in hand, shirtless, while Suzanne sunbathed nearby. Later, he changed his story. He said he'd tranquilized a deer, and that's why investigators found a dart cap in the dryer. And when confronted about his truck's odd location, headed west toward where Suzanne's helmet would later be found, Barry told the FBI he was following a bull elk. A bull elk in the middle of the night on a highway. And then came the statement that stuck with everyone. Remember when he told FBI this in April of 2021?
I look guilty from the evidence, and God allowed these things to happen.
Investigators had already found Suzanne's bike and her helmet nearly a mile away, staged, not tossed randomly as it was intended to appear. They'd found a spent bullet casing near the garage. They'd found scratches on Barry's arms. They'd found deleted text messages, deleted calls, missing voicemails. They found Suzanne's own words in a hidden file on her phone, a record of abuse, of fear, and of a woman preparing to leave. And Barry, he wasn't just failing to help the investigation, he was trying to steer it. He misled police, changed his timelines, made excuses. He filed for guardianship of their 2 daughters, sold off assets, and moved on as if Suzanne was never coming back. But law enforcement was not letting go. Not of the case, not of the evidence, not of the truth. The timeline was building. By the spring of 2021, the public didn't know everything investigators had uncovered, but law enforcement did. And what they had was enough. That's when Barry Morphew was arrested. "364 days after Suzanne disappeared, Barry Morphew was arrested. It wasn't for trespassing. It wasn't for obstruction. It was for murder, 1st degree, along with 2 more felony charges, tampering with physical evidence and attempting to influence a public servant. It was the moment Suzanne's case officially shifted from a missing persons investigation to a homicide. Initially, he was held without bond, but 4 months later, on September 20th, everything shifted when Barry stood in court, surrounded by his daughters, and pleaded not guilty to all charges. He was released that same day after posting a $500,000 cash bond.
In a case with no body, there are now no charges, and who killed Suzanne Morphew remains unsolved. Morphew vanished from her Chaffee County home on Mother's Day 2 years ago. Her husband Barry charged with her murder, but today a judge dismissed the charges and he walked out of the court with his daughters. Investigator Rick Salinger has the reason why, and he joins us live in the newsroom with our top story. Rick?
Well, Kelly, the trial was to start next week, but prosecutors were penalized, losing many of their key witnesses for failure to turn over evidence to the defense on time. And now they asked for more time to find critical evidence. With his daughters at his side, Barry Morphew left court knowing charges could be refiled against him. The prosecution motion stated further investigation into this matter is essential to answering the most consequential question presented by this case. That question, of course, is where is Morphew's wife, Suzanne? Massive searches have taken place since she disappeared on Mother's Day 2020. The prosecution indicated it could be close to finding her. The defense claimed they are looking at the wrong person.
This community was actually believed wrongfully that Mr. Morphew is guilty when there's not even an ounce of evidence against him.
The prosecution added, as this search cannot be accomplished in the coming weeks due to weather and snowpack conditions, the people respectfully asked this court to dismiss the current indictment.
We were going to get Mr. Morphew acquitted, rightly, after a trial that we believed we were going to have.
Prosecutors called off the charges after many of their expert witnesses were thrown out. Ross Chohan is a CBS 4 legal analyst.
I think the fact that you have to file a motion to dismiss without prejudice shortly before trial is an indication that the prosecution's case was in really bad shape.
Morphew left court without comment. The emotion of the moment left to his daughters and lawyer. If that trial had started and the charges dropped, then Morphew could not be charged again. Jim?
It was a shocking visual. Barry Morphew, accused of murdering his wife, walking out of jail with his daughters at his side. The trial was scheduled, but then came more delays, more motions, more cracks in the case. By early 2022, Barry's legal team was pushing hard for a change of venue, citing intense media coverage. The judge granted it. But that was just the beginning. Behind the scenes, the prosecution's case was falling apart. In April of 2022, just 9 days before Barry was set to stand trial, prosecutors made a stunning move. They dropped the charges. It was an official filing, dismissed without prejudice, which meant they could refile the charges later, but for now, the case was dead. So what was their reason? They said they needed more time. Without Suzanne's body, they couldn't prove how she died, or even confirm that she had died. Deputy District Attorney Mark Hurlbert admitted in open court.
We actually have more than just a feeling. She is in a very difficult spot.
Prosecutors hoped that with new forensic tools and more time, they'd finally find Suzanne. But there was more. Judge Ramsey Lama had sanctioned the prosecution for multiple discovery violations. Evidence was mishandled, expert witnesses were improperly prepared, and some of the most critical digital evidence wasn't shared with the defense in time. It was enough to break the case. And so, Barry walked free. But he didn't walk away quietly. He filed a $15 million federal lawsuit, claiming malicious prosecution and civil rights violations. He said law enforcement had destroyed his life without ever proving he was guilty. And just like that, for more than a year, there were no charges, no trial, no answers. Suzanne was still missing. But something else was simmering beneath the surface. Investigators weren't done, and neither was the story. Because in September of 2023, nearly 3.5 years after Suzanne Morphew vanished, everything changed. It was September 22nd, 2023, the first day of fall. In the wide open stretch of Saguache County, Colorado, a place where trees give way to sagebrush, investigators were digging in search of a body, working their way through the dry, stubborn, sun-bleached dirt. It's a landscape that doesn't give up its secrets easily. But that day, that high desert basin gave up not one, but 2 secrets. It wasn't a search for Suzanne Morphew, at least not officially. Investigators were working a different case, but in that remote field, roughly 45 miles from where she'd last been seen, they just happened to find her.
Was one of 2 bodies found during a search for a missing Saguache County woman in an unrelated case. That woman's family tells 13 Investigates they want closure too. Investigative reporter Quinn Ritzdorf is live in studio with those details on her disappearance. Quinn.
Edna Quintana has been missing from Saguache since early May, but searches for the missing 55-year-old have led to the discovery of 2 bodies, including Suzanne Morphew. Suzanne Morphew's body was found south of Moffett along Highway 17, but her body might not have been found if investigators weren't searching for Edna Quintana, a woman from Saguache who had been missing since May.
That county, Saguache County, is getting a reputation for that being called like the boneyard, just because they've found over the years so many, persons there, bodies or bones, whatever.
It was a shallow grave, a forgotten patch of earth in the middle of nowhere. Dusty, remote, quiet. The kind of place no one stumbles upon, unless they're looking for something else, which they were. Another woman, missing, presumed dead. Edna Quintana. Edna's disappearance is what prompted the search, and Suzanne's remains were found in the process. Bones, weathered and worn by time, but unmistakable. And finally, after more than 3 years of silence, of tip lines, protests, prayers, and courtroom delays, Suzanne had finally been found. What arrived at the coroner's office that day wasn't a body. It was evidence. 3 large paper bags filled with unknown skeletal remains. A skull, a jawbone, femurs, vertebrae, fragments of rib, bits of tibia. And then came the clothing, a green Nike tank top, a ripped blue hoodie labeled Crested Butte, Yeti brand shorts, a single pink and white glove, and a faded balaclava. Also found near the remains, 5 fabric fragments and 1 weathered bullet. But what stood out most wasn't visible. Inside Suzanne's femur, pathologists found something else, a cocktail of powerful animal tranquilizers, butorphanol, azaparone, and medetomidine, known in combination as BAM. It's a potent drug used by veterinarians and wildlife officials to sedate large animals. Think moose, bears, wild horses. It works fast. It's actually reversible. And in high doses, it can be lethal. The coroner's report was clear: homicide by unspecified means in the setting of BAM intoxication. Here is the very interesting thing about BAM. It's not just something anyone can get their hands on. This tranquilizer is tightly regulated. Only licensed veterinarians, wildlife officials, or individuals with special authorization can purchase or administer it. And records showed that only a few entities had access to it: the National Park Service, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and 1 private citizen in that region, Barry Morphew. Turns out, he'd purchased several BAM kits back in 2018. And when Suzanne disappeared in 2020, he was the only civilian in the area authorized to possess it. The autopsy further confirmed there were no signs of trauma, no broken bones, no gunshot wounds, no rope marks or ligature injuries. But the sedatives told a clear story. Suzanne hadn't fought. She hadn't run. She didn't have time to. Because she'd been hunted and taken down, methodically, chemically. And there was more. The condition of Suzanne's remains suggested something deeply disturbing. Her bones showed minimal signs of decomposition. There was no insect activity, no gnawing, no evidence of animals disturbing the grave. In other words, she hadn't been there the whole time. Forensic experts and the coroner agreed. This wasn't where Suzanne had died. Her body had likely been stored, hidden, preserved for months, maybe years, before finally being buried in that remote field. In fact, an article from 48 Hours, updated on July 6, 2025, reports that Suzanne's body was moved at least twice after she was murdered, and before reaching that final location. Someone had kept her somewhere. And when the time came, they finally dug a shallow grave and quietly placed her remains in it. No markers, no stones, just her bones and dirt, as if she could be forgotten. By late 2023, prosecutors now had what they didn't have in 2021: Suzanne's body, a cause of death, and a forensic link between Barry Morphew and the drugs in her system. But that wasn't all. The lead prosecutor in the original case, Linda Stanley, the one who held the press conferences and led the high-profile charge, had been disbarred for misconduct, sanctioned for making inappropriate media statements, and even attempting to launch a criminal investigation into the judge who had ruled against her. And that $15 million lawsuit Barry filed against her in Chaffee County, it was dismissed. But behind the scenes, a grand jury had been quietly convened. And in April of 2025, the charges returned.
Barry Morphew was initially charged with first-degree murder and evidence tampering 4 years ago. Those charges later dropped just days before his trial was set to begin.
In 2022, the prosecution dropped the case against Barry Morphew because there was a number of holes within their case. There were some evidentiary issues that they were precluded from presenting, but probably the most serious part of it, they didn't have a body. No cause or manner of death to really explain what happened to Suzanne Morphew.
In 2023, Morphew spoke exclusively to ABC News with his daughters Mallory and Macy by his side, maintaining his innocence and claiming his life had been ruined by the allegations.
Did you have anything to do with the disappearance of your wife?
Absolutely not.
You never had a shred of doubt that your dad was completely innocent?
I've never had a shred of doubt. Not one.
Was there any indication before she disappeared that something was amiss?
No. Macy and I were texting her on our road trip, having the sweetest conversations and sending her pictures of the fun that we were having.
Did you observe any fights, arguments, disagreements between your mom and your dad that concerned you before?
No.
When you found out that Suzanne was having an affair, what was your first thought?
My heart was broke. My heart was broken. I didn't believe it. Anybody that knows her wouldn't have believed it, and I didn't believe it until they showed me proof. I made them prove it because they kept lying to me about other things. I thought, well, this is another lie to get me to say something, and I made them prove it, and it was just heartbreaking.
Morphew denied the marriage was in trouble.
We had a wonderful life, wonderful marriage. She was just so loving and giving and such a good mother.
Barry Morphew was re-indicted by a grand jury and charged again with first-degree murder, tampering with physical evidence, and attempting to influence a public servant. The same primary charges from Barry's original 2021 indictment, but this time they were supported by the new forensic evidence, the discovery of Suzanne's body, and the toxicology report showing the remnants of a powerful tranquilizer found deep in her femur. They also knew that Barry Morphew was the only private citizen in the region with access to that specific tranq mixture. My co-producer Andrea and I were present, virtually, at Barry's first court appearance. We watched him enter the courtroom. We heard the judge read the charges. And for the first time in years, the system felt ready. Ready to say Suzanne's name again. Ready to try again. This time with her story intact. And this time with her body found. It's a moment many weren't sure would ever come. A second indictment, a system circling back, not to redeem itself, but to give it a better shot, just like they had set out to do. This time, though, it would be with Suzanne's voice at the center. We'll continue to follow this case, including Barry Morphew's trial, and we'll be sure to keep you updated along the way. If you want a deeper dive into this case, head over to our website, sequesteredpod.com. We have all kinds of content, footage, photos, and more. Do you have something to share? A theory, a memory of Suzanne, or a question? Feel free to send us a message. We read every single one. If you've made it through all 3 parts of this case, thank you for sitting with the discomfort, for honoring the truth, and for keeping Suzanne's name alive. We'll be back next week with a new case, one that's as devastating and as necessary as this one. Until then, stay curious, stay compassionate, and never forget these stories. They deserve to be told.